bring them some exciting stuff today, Travis. We've got 6 wide receivers that you're going to want to draft on your fantasy team. Last week, we gave you 5 running backs, gave you 2 bonus ones, too, if you listen to the podcast. Today, we're giving you 6 wide receivers.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, we're going to give you 6 this week and 6 next week. We looked at these wide receivers, and we were just like, man, there's so many of these value wide receivers, and it just proves that, like, if you take running back early, which we usually advise to do in a lot of your redraft leagues, you can be looking in your mid to late rounds for wide receivers that have a lot of value.
Right here.
If you're watching the show right now on YouTube, go ahead and hit like and subscribe. That helps us build this program, build this community, and keep bringing you that fresh fantasy football content. Now, to the meat and potatoes, Johnny. I hope you're hungry because we've got a big plate this week. We've got part 1 of our must-draft wide receiver values, and we're just going to start rolling down in order of ADP. That's how me and Johnny looked at this. We looked, you go to fantasyfootballcalculator.com, guys, and that will give you your ADP across any kind of point scoring system. It's a really good platform. We use it all the time. So me and Johnny, at the beginning of this week, we looked down this list and we said, okay, let's start naming off guys and then say, ooh, we like that guy. Ooh, we like that guy. And literally,
it was a problem. It was a problem.
Like, we can only give you so many guys on here because we've only got so much time.
We had a list of like 14 guys.
Kelsey brings out the hook.
Yeah.
And like pulls us off screen. So
she's like, you guys, we only have a certain amount of time to record. Let's not go overboard here.
Well, and she's a busy woman, so we can't keep her all that. Anyways, Calvin Ridley is our first one here, Johnny. He's being drafted at 406. That's his ADP. The wide receiver 19, I think people are kind of forgetting because he did get injured at the end of last year. So people are kind of forgetting how good Calvin Ridley's been. So let's shake off the rust of your memory here, Johnny. Let's dive into Calvin Ridley and why he's so intriguing at that ADP.
So you look at what he did last year. I understand that he got injured, but he was playing 80% of the snaps. 10% in the slot. It'll be interesting to see if that will go up a little bit now that we have a full season without we have Russell Gage is there as the tight or a slot wide receiver. They might move Calvin Ridley just because he's so effective. But he still had 93 targets last year. Here's what I like: 20 deep targets, was ranked 28th. Calvin Ridley's not really the deep guy, or he's not known to be a deep guy. So the fact that he's getting 20 deep targets is very, very, very good for your fantasy team. That's a low-key stat that you like to look at. Still had 866 receiving yards. Look, the stats are all there. We know where he comes from. We know the pedigree. When you break down his week to week, that's when I start to get worried. He doesn't necessarily, with Julio Jones there, it kind of caps his ceiling. But here's the main reason why we like his value so much, and we think he is a steal. Because right now you're getting pretty much what he's going to do, right? You're buying him pretty much at his value. So you're going to come at us and you're going to say, well, why is he such a value if you're getting him at his value? That doesn't make any sense. Well, the major thing here that a lot of people aren't building in is the fact that if Julio Jones were to go down, now I understand Julio Jones has not missed a game in a long time, so I'm not saying that, nor do I want him to. But you also are now, yeah, right. But you got to realize that now, if that does happen, Calvin Ridley has the skill and the ability to step up and be that wide receiver 1. That is the plan. After Julio Jones is gone, guess who will be the wide receiver 1 there? It's going to be Calvin Ridley. So you have this upside that a lot of players don't necessarily have when you're thinking about drafting around that area. You're getting guys like Keenan Allen, to T.Y. Hilton. Those guys are at their tip of where they're going to be going. That value is pretty much capped for me, in my opinion. Whereas, the situation can only get better for Calvin Ridley.
I mean, I think that's it. I think that you nail it right there when you talk about the situation getting better, because look, he's really lived off touchdowns. Okay, in 2018,
and he's good at it.
In 2018, he had 10 total touchdowns. That was good for 6th in the NFL. Last year, he had 7 total touchdowns. That was good for 13th in the NFL, even with those 3 games missed. But Johnny, we always say touchdowns are volatile. We can't really project guys on touchdowns. Why would you want me to invest in a guy with touchdowns? Because we know he's a talent. We know he's going to be their plan for after Julio. And so if he's just got to make up the gap in yardage and targets, that's a pretty good gap to make up, because that's the things in this offense. I mean, Atlanta is consistently top 5 in passing with Matt Ryan. They are always up there in passing plays per game. Ridley is destined to be this guy in this offense. And if you grab him in the 4th round now and he finally puts up that, and what if Julio takes a little bit of a step back? I'm not saying he will, but if he does, like Johnny said, or if he gets injured, you've got a guy in Ridley that really becomes a wide receiver 1, where you drafted him as a wide receiver 2.
Last 4 weeks before he got injured, week 11, 12, 13, 14, he was wide receiver 3, wide receiver 8, wide receiver 17, and wide receiver 13. Those are the last 4 weeks before he got injured, and you're getting him right now. He's coming off the board as wide receiver 19, wide receiver 20. So come on, Whisper Nation.
I mean, the disrespect is there. Hopefully he doesn't rise too high. You definitely love right at that sweet spot at wide receiver 19 through 25. You'd be like, yes. But speaking of wide receiver 25, an ADP of the 5th round, 501, Johnny, we're going to talk about Robert Woods, who, Troy Aikman spent a whole Thursday night gushing over Robert Woods about his route running, and he was the best wide receiver
you sound
he'd ever
jealous.
seen.
You sound jealous.
No, listen, dude. Yeah. Anyways, Robert Woods is playing on a team that just saw some vacated targets. Todd Gurley, Brandon Cooks are leaving this offense, and you're talking about Robert Woods, who's been a consistent wide receiver. He is the guy. So before they traded for Brandon Cooks, back when they did, he was the guy they brought in and paid as a wide receiver 1. Okay. Mm-hmm. And now who's still here? Not Brandon Cooks after they traded for him, but Robert Woods is still here, a guy that consistently puts up numbers for them, and now is going to be a guy that you can draft in the 5th round as the wide receiver 25, who has ended up consistently with this McVay offense as a wide receiver 15 or better in PPR scoring. So, Johnny, what are people not seeing here?
Here's what it is: recency biased, and you'll see this be a theme across a lot of these guys. Recency bias. Please don't buy significantly into that. We will let you know if you need to buy into it or not. This is definitely not one. Robert Woods is a player that a lot of people are sleeping on right now. And honestly, he's really cheap to acquire in a lot of these leagues. I mean, you're talking about consistency, Travis. Key of consistency. Mm-hmm. Past 2 seasons, Robert Woods averaged. This is what he averaged: 8.8 targets per game, 5.7 receptions per game, 75.9 receiving yards per game, which equates to 16.1 fantasy points per game over the last 2 years. That's what he's averaged. You're telling me you don't want to grab that as a 25th wide receiver off the board? Come on. You're going to definitely
top 10. Yeah, top 10 in targets, top 10 in receptions, top 15 in receiving yards, Johnny, last year. This is a guy.
He had all of that, Travis, but he only scored 2 touchdowns. 2 touchdowns. So similar to Leonard Fournette and how people are swinging way hard on the other way, this is what people are doing with Robert Woods. 139 targets, he only got 2 touchdowns. People, that will go up. That is way too low. The average, on average, needs to go up. So Robert Woods is someone that I think is an
positive regression.
Thank you. Yes,
we think positive regression is due for those touchdowns for sure when you're looking at Robert Woods. I will say, though, in his career, hasn't been a huge touchdown guy. So he doesn't live with a lot of touchdowns, but he has averaged more around 5 than 2. So you're talking about a little bit more for a guy who was top 15, push him into that top 10, top 12 range. Yep. Because of the touchdowns. And once again, you're getting him at wide receiver 25. So, I just think.
Once they moved over to 11 personnel, from 11 personnel to 12 personnel, and he saw the majority of the snaps, and it wasn't Cooper Kupp. So from weeks 9 to 17, he was the wide receiver 12 without getting very many touchdowns. So you add in and sprinkle in those, I think 5, like you said, 5 to 6 is right around that sweet spot.
Yeah, and I think, he's just being slept on like all these guys kind of are if you look at their ADP. So moving on to, your breakout guy's teammate.
Yeah.
Allen Robinson for the Chicago Bears plays alongside Anthony Miller, who Johnny really likes. But Allen Robinson getting slept on here a little bit too, Johnny. 5'08", wide receiver 27, I believe. And so we're talking about Allen Robinson, who is also maybe going to be profitable from the addition of BDN out of the University of Arizona. Shout out to the Wildcats there. So Nick Foles, what does he do for Allen Robinson here, Johnny?
Oh my goodness. If I was excited for Anthony Miller, boy, am I excited for Allen Robinson. Okay. This guy, okay, people still feel this way with Allen Robinson because he bursts out year 2, as a monster wide receiver, breakout, everyone, hurrah, get out the the parade, let's get out the streamers, let's throw a party. And everyone bought in. And then what happened? He was not anywhere close. So since then, he has had a hard climb back up. People aren't sure if they can trust him. But you look at what he did last year. Last year, what he did with Mitch Trubisky, he was 27 in deep targets. That was good for wide receiver 8 at that position. He got 27% of that Bears market share there. 98 receptions, which would seem a little bit low. I do think that he'll get the receptions up. Again, that has to do with accuracy issues. 7 touchdowns, you like that? That could even potentially go up a little bit more, considering the fact that he got 29.9% of the red zone targets, Travis. But listen, you are going to get a lot of people who are sleeping on, and it sounds like, a lot of people are going to say, Johnny, why are you so high on the Bears offense? Are you listening to Adam Rank too much? Maybe the answer is maybe. But no, I just think that there is a lot of potential here, and I just think it takes the right quarterback in order to unlock that. And we've seen that with Ryan Tannehill in Tennessee. We've seen this happen time and time again where you have these.
Yeah, and we've seen it with flashes of Nick Foles. It's not like we have to reach to other players to figure out if Nick Foles could be successful in the right offense with the right scheme. And don't forget that Matt Nagy is familiar with Nick Foles. Like, this is an old coach of his. He understands.
That's right.
Who
In Kansas City, you're right.
That's right. So, like, there's a reason why they would be going after a guy like Nick Foles and not worrying about trying to do it in the draft and, be ready to move on from Mitch Trubisky. And I think, Allen Robinson, look, he was a wide receiver 12 last year. He was wide receiver 12 last year. That's a number 1 wide receiver. Okay. So right now he's being drafted as a number 27 wide receiver. If he falls somewhere in the middle of that, Johnny, with a better quarterback in my mind, then you're getting a value. So don't be afraid of Allen Robinson at his current 5th round ADP. It's a steal. It's a nice pick. And you'll be happy going home with that because you'll get that consistent wide receiver play that you need in a very, sometimes inconsistent position. All right, so moving on to Marquise Brown, one of my favorite young players in the NFL right now, one of my favorite young offenses in the NFL right now, being thrown to by one of my favorite quarterbacks in the NFL right now. Marquise Hollywood Brown is, first of all, I follow him on Instagram. He is working. Yeah, they got that guy working at night. He's got his helmet on and suspension bands working at night right now.
He's doing it with no shoes on. So I'm like, how much traction? You're not going to get that much traction, dude.
Hey, he understands what to do. He doesn't want. Well, maybe he burnt his feet like his cousin in the cryogenic chamber.
Hey, maybe.
So we won't get too much into why he scares us because he's related to Antonio Brown, but we will get into the fact that Marquise Brown did some pretty fun things last year on the Ravens, especially down the stretch when he finally got his legs under him. He had the Liz Frank injury last year, Johnny, that kind of kept him out of training camp, and he was not even practicing or getting ready to go until week 1 against the Dolphins last year. So, Johnny, talk to me a little bit about Marquise Brown. Do you expect big things? He's being drafted, Johnny, right now at the 6th round as wide receiver 35. In my mind, as the number 1 guy getting a target share with the way that he gets down the field, he's got to finish better than that.
Yeah, Marquise Brown there's going to be a lot of hype around Marquise Brown. I can guarantee that. He is one of those types of players that is very, very exciting to watch. Like you said, he is going to give you these monster weeks, but I do think that there are going to be, with those kind of players comes the heavy down weeks. Now, you'll take the good with the bad, I believe, with Marquise Brown. I think that his downside is well worth it, and the price that you're going to pay for that, the ability to get in that upside, to tap that upside, is definitely worth it. Why? I'll tell you why. Because this guy is so fast, and you pair it with the fact that, with the offensive scheme that he is in, it is going to be difficult to cover everything. And yeah, is Lamar super accurate, down the field or deep down the field? No, he's not, but he doesn't necessarily have to be all the time in order to provide a lot of fantasy value to Marquise Brown. This guy, they'll get the ball in his hands. The targets aren't necessarily the highest. If you look from a game-to-game perspective, they aren't super high like you like to see. But guess what? On some of these weeks, they were extremely high. Weeks 1, he had 8 receptions. On weeks week 4, 4 receptions. Week 5, 3 receptions. There weren't a ton of receptions on some of these, but you have to remember that he was injured, like Travis said.
Well, and I think when you talk about the targets, Johnny, like you make a great point, right? He was 102 in the league in snap share, so he wasn't on the field a lot, right? So no wonder he wasn't getting a lot of snaps. So you say, well, maybe that's the way Baltimore wants to run their offense. They want to run first. Lamar Jackson, going back to Louisville and all his years there, has improved as a passer every single year as a athlete passing the football. And he did so last year and won the MVP, not just on his ability to run the football, but they are going to pass more with him. You look at how they shipped Hayden Hurst out of there, and they want to get down to Mark Andrews. They don't want to just do all the tight end play. They're going to work in some wide receivers here, and Marquise Brown is a big focal point for what they want to do here. Yes, the target and snap share was down, but the red zone receptions, Johnny, 9 red zone receptions last year. That was 13th. 7 total touchdowns. Once again, 13th in the NFL. So we know that there's trust there. We know Lamar Jackson, who has also been working out, breaking social distancing to work out with Marquise Brown this offseason. So you don't like to see him breaking social distancing, but you like to see that Marquise Brown is getting work in with his quarterback. And I think that bodes well for his prospects. And once again, I'll repeat here, wide receiver 35, I think he's going to finish better than that. He
definitely has the ability to be a top 15 wide receiver. So, and you're getting him so late in drafts, he's definitely a guy that you should be looking at. You want those high upside guys.
You're drafting him there as a flex who could end up being just a dominant flex for you because he ends up being, a week-to-week wide receiver 2 or better. All right. Speaking of another exciting guy, Johnny, this list just keeps getting better and better.
This is one of my favorites on this list.
Yeah, honestly, this is probably a guy I could have chose for who is it? Is it?
I thought you were. I honestly did. I shied away. One, because we're going to talk about him in the show, and 2, I thought you were going to talk about him.
Yeah, no, I couldn't do that. I couldn't rob Whisper Nation and talk about him twice and make him listen to me twice about him. But Will Fuller is the guy we're talking about. Will Fuller is being drafted in the 6th round behind Marquise Brown as wide receiver 32 and has watched maybe the best wide receiver in the league as far as catch radius, route running, and just ability to tie it all together in DeAndre Hopkins walk out the door here, or actually get forced out the door by his head coach, Bill O'Brien. But anyways, Will Fuller is poised here, Johnny, for...
We digress.
We've said it for a few years now, and injury is the biggest thing with Will Fuller. It is every year something new pops up, and it's unfortunate because the fantasy football community is being robbed by the concept of never seeing Will Fuller and Deshaun Watson fully healthy for a season together, because when they are on the field together, Johnny, literal fantasy football magic happens here. It's touchdowns, deep balls. Like, Will Fuller isn't just an extreme burner.
Okay.
Go for it.
Sorry, I am just chomping at the bit to get to talk about Will Fuller, because Will Fuller to me could potentially be my favorite player to possibly draft in the entire draft. And I'll tell you why. Because every year he continues to go around the same spot, 7th, 8th round, right? And every year we have the same argument. We're like, if Will Fuller pops off this year, if he, and so every single year he stayed around because everyone knows that there's that true value. To me, he is a true lotto ticket that I am willing to grab as 10 out of 10 times. Why? Because you look at his game-to-game production, and it shows you right there. Last year, in 2018, he only played 7 games, but he had a number 6 finish, a number 10 finish, and another 10 finish. So 3 top 10 finishes in 8 weeks of action, right? And then you look at 2019, he had week 5, number 1 overall finish at the wide receiver position. Week 12, number 10 finish at the wide receiver position. And all of those things happen with DeAndre Hopkins. And we've talked about it before, how DeAndre Hopkins and Will Fuller, they have coexisted both as wide receiver ones. And what there were 6 times when that has happened over the course of their career, and 2 out of those 6 times Will Fuller actually finished higher than DeAndre Hopkins in that certain week. So Will Fuller has the potential, he has the talent. It just takes him staying healthy, and we don't ever like to bank on a player getting injured. And so if I have the upside of I know if this guy stays healthy, it's not a question of does this guy have the talent to be a top 10 wide receiver? I don't know. Is he in an offense that can sustain a top 10 wide receiver? All those boxes are checked. They're all checked.
Yeah, dude. It's like this. If Will Fuller stays healthy for 13, 14 games of this season, you're going to be sitting here going, when they do those counts of how, what different players are on championship rosters, I can almost guarantee you that Will Fuller will be on a good amount of a 60, 70% of championship rosters if he stays healthy the full year, because all of the stars are aligning there. I understand they brought in Brandon Cooks, but we know what Brandon Cooks is. Brandon Cooks is a complimentary speedster wide receiver. He is not the number 1 guy here. Will Fuller is ready. And I think Bill O'Brien knows that. And
yes.
if Bill O'Brien wants, you don't think Bill O'Brien wants to prove the media wrong and say, I was okay getting rid of DeAndre Hopkins? No, you weren't. I was okay to trade DeAndre Hopkins. No, you weren't. Yeah. But in his mind, Will Fuller will get used like so. And I think that's a situation where Will Fuller can easily end up a top 12 wide receiver at the price of nearly a wide receiver 3.
Last thing I want to bring up, because I know we keep rambling about Will Fuller, but this is very important. Think about this. Just a few years ago, who was along the same thing where it was injury? He was a good wide receiver, but always injury came associated with his name. Who was it? Keenan Allen. Same thing. And guess what? The people who 2 years ago bought in because everyone else was saying, injury. And 2 years ago, you got him in the 7th round.
3 years ago.
3 years ago,
Johnny, because now I was just writing Keenan Allen's profile the other day for our fantasy football draft kit, which you guys will be able to pre-order on the fantasywhispers.com. But anyways, shameless plug. Keenan Allen now has 3 straight years of full seasons. So we're talking about a situation, very similar. Now, Keenan Allen's injuries were a little more freak than Will Fuller's have been. Will Fuller's have been definitely that style of play. But listen, man, I trust medical technology. I trust the fact that Will Fuller could have been put back together like Humpty Dumpty and ready to just take over.
He's just a robot now.
Yeah, he's like Adrian Peterson a couple years ago. A couple knee surgeries later, and he wins MVP. What the heck? So I think it can be done on both ways, and I'm just very excited about Will Fuller, especially at that price.
Yes.
Now, saving the last, but definitely not least in Johnny's mind, at the very least, is Scary Terry McLaurin being drafted at the 605 spot. Terry McLaurin, Johnny,
listen.
Speak to Whisper Nation about your boy.
If it was I don't know if there's some grade scale of how much you could love a player in fantasy, but for this year, Scary Terry is that player for me. It's getting up there with the Dante.
You just said it was Will Fuller.
Well, hey, I mean, we moved on. That was 5 minutes ago. Okay,
man,
I forgot about Scary Terry for a second. All right, no, Will Fuller is great, but Scary Terry, okay. I get all the hype. I get all the hate on him because of Dwayne Haskins, new offensive scheme. People are concerned. They're saying, do we even buy into Scary Terry and what he did? Similar to DJ Chark. And this is why we had a whole episode on second-year wide receivers, because a lot of people are writing off these first-year wide receivers, saying it was kind of fluky, blah, blah, blah. But let's dive in a little bit, shall we? You look at, we know that Dwayne Haskins played with Terry McLaurin in college. So we really did start to see that hookup. We saw that connection happen, and you look from week 12 to 16, 5 targets, 2 targets in week 13, which wasn't the best. That was the lowest point. But week 14, 4 targets and a touchdown. Week 15, 5 targets and a touchdown. And week 16, 7 targets, 9 targets, 7 receptions. All those were receptions, not targets. I apologize. Targets are much significant. 4, 12, 4, 7, 5, 9. So there is definitely the chemistry there between Dwayne Haskins and Terry McLaurin. They didn't bring in anyone that's going to really push Terry McLaurin's spot. I mean, they brought in Candy Golden. Gandy Golden, thank you. But he'll play the opposite side of McLaurin if he sees the field. McLaurin is the wide receiver 1 there. You are going to want him on your fantasy team. It is a shame as to where he is going. He had 93 targets last year, and he still was able to be a top 24 wide receiver, Travis, and he is being drafted way outside of that. It's absurd. It's absurd. You need to believe in Scary Terry. You will want him on your roster. 24% red zone target share, Travis. 24%.
Yeah, I think the thing to remember here is that Ron Rivera has come in here as the head coach. He hired he hired his offensive coordinator or a former guy that used to work with him in Carolina. So you look at what Carolina used to do with maybe not exactly similar, but a big-bodied quarterback that can throw down the field. And, I think that there's space for Scary Terry here to really look. I think the best argument for Scary Terry has and always will be that he played with Dwayne Haskins in college. And I think we cannot understate the relationship that a QB and a wide receiver build over time. And if you have years on 2 second-year guys, but they still have years worth of chemistry together, that bodes well if you're trying to bet on a young wide receiver. If you're trying to sit here and say, I think he can continue to do this, well, where's the continuity? The continuity is in that chemistry. And I think that's the biggest thing for me. Yes, I agree that Scary Terry is getting slept on. And I agree that the guys we talked about ahead of him today are the guys you want to take ahead of him. Yeah, I think that's fair. Well, but there's other guys.
I wouldn't. I don't. It would be situational. I love Scary Terry, but I also want to point out that Ron Rivera. You made a great point, and Ron Rivera coming over from Carolina. And similar situations. Ron Rivera has already come out and said that he's very impressed with Terry McLaurin, and he reminds him a lot of another monster friend of the show, or monster friend of me, my boy, DJ Moore. Yeah, dude. So he's already come out and said
the drops are back.
Hey, he's already come out and said that he reminds him a lot of DJ Moore. And you already know our position on DJ Moore, at least my position on DJ Moore. So give me some Scary Terry.
Johnny Game Times Hicks takes do not speak for the entire Fantasy Whispers team. Just throwing that out there.
Well,
no, but I like Terry McLaurin. I think the comp to DJ Moore and at least the production is there, and I think Terry McLaurin is getting slept on. Well, that's it for part 1, Johnny. That is it for part 1 of our must-draft value wide receivers. We're very excited to bring you this episode, but we want to know, Whisper Nation, what you're thinking. If you are listening to the show on audio, go ahead and hit us up on social media. You can find all of our platforms by searching The Fantasy Whispers or going to thefantasywhispers.com. You can comment there. If you're watching the video, comment below. Let us know who your favorite value wide receivers are, and we'd love to have that go down for you. All right, so for Johnny Game Time Hicks, I'm Big Travy, and Chelsea Lee Byers is the woman behind the glass. We are out. We're the Fantasy Whispers. Peace.
Peace.
Thank you for listening to the Fantasy Whisperers podcast. You can hear more from John and Travis on Google Play, SoundCloud, and iTunes. You can also follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at TF Whisperers.